Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Griffin, and I'm the Executive Director of ACMP. I'm so happy all of you came out today, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to ACMP member violist, librarian, and software engineer Phyllis Kaiden, who will give a presentation on JamKazam, Jamulus, and SonoBus. Phyllis, thank you. I'll let you take it from here.
Well, good morning from the West Coast. Good afternoon from everywhere else, I guess, and everywhere else in the mainland of the U.S. I'm so happy to see you all here. I imagine that many of you have experimented a little bit with playing online. Maybe you tried using Zoom. Maybe that didn't work for you so well. And if you live in the Pacific Northwest, the weather got really rainy and cold too soon, and we couldn't play outdoors. So this morning, I'm going to take you on a journey with me of how I came to be playing on all these different apps. And I have a little presentation, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see that, and we'll go from there. Okay, so Stephanie, is that all showing okay?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so today we're going to do a walkthrough, as Stephanie said, of Jamulus, JamKazam, and SonoBus. And in case you have any reason to contact me, either because you want some technical help or you just want to invite me to play, here's my email right there on this first screen. It's also on the very last slide as well. So let's get going. So my journey through to online music was basically like this. In March, there was a lockdown. There was no music allowed. I had this elaborate ACMP play-ins planned. I had 50 people signed up for it. And days before it, I had to cancel everything. So literally, this was me. I was crying like Snoopy here. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way. And so I got some friends together on Zoom and we tried playing a trio and quickly discovered that only one person could really make a sound at a time. Two people sort of, but not really. And the third one was just completely out of it. So that was a failure. And then I thought, all right, well, let me see what's out there. As a former librarian, I like researching things. And so I went online and I discovered that there are all these kinds of apps out there. And for whatever reason, I chose to start with JamKazam. And I did that first with a friend from Canada. In Victoria, BC. So not quite 200 miles away, probably more like 150 or something like that. And it kind of worked, but there was a noticeable lag between us. And then he got kind of disgusted with JamKazam and tried Jamulus, and I'm like, oh, well, that's better. And then somewhere in the November, December time frame, another app came out called SonoBus, and that's also really good. So these are the three apps that I am using, and I'm a pretty happy violist in terms of that. It's not as good as playing in person, but it's certainly better than not playing together at all. So I want to encourage you all. You can do this. You may need some help, but you absolutely can do this. And there are people who are quite willing to help. So what are these low latency apps that we're talking about? A little bit later, I'll discuss what low latency means, but the applications for online distributed playing of music were primarily written for rock bands and not for classical music, but nevertheless, they work for chamber musicians. And the three I use are listed at the top: JamKazam, Jamulus, and SonoBus, and there are the links that will take you to their home pages, and you can see how long they've been around and what they cost. So of the three, Jamulus and SonoBus are free. They are what is called open source, meaning that there's a community of developers who can work on them, and their work is shared freely, not for money. They usually have a GoFundMe to help them get equipment and things, but you don't have to do that. It's free. JamKazam was free until the beginning of the year, and then they went to a subscription model. You can look on that web page and follow the links to find out how much it costs, but you can still do a free subscription. It's just not very satisfying. It's an hour 4 times a month or something like that. So you might want to upgrade to what's called the Gold subscription, which is available at a 50% discount, so only $50 for the entire year from ACMP. And Stephanie can fill you in on that if you're interested. So just to give them a nod, there are other applications that are out there. They work. I haven't used them, but there are lots of videos and articles about them, and there are new developments all the time. For example, this one called Aloha, which I believe is out of Europe, is working on an app that will work over 5G. Jack Tripp's Studio is one that is gaining popularity with teachers who need a bunch of students to have a plug-and-play kind of minimal investment for a good low latency application. So they have been doing a lot of beta testing with teachers and in educational settings. And so there we have it. There's kind of a survey of what's out there, but we're going to concentrate on the first 3. So I just want to show you that there are benefits to online jamming. Of course, there's the whole social distance thing. And for me, I live on Vashon Island in the Pacific Northwest, which is about a 15-20-minute ferry ride from Seattle. But you know, there's a lot of traffic in Seattle. There's a bridge that's out. All these things happened. So in order to get anywhere in Seattle, if I didn't need to be socially distanced, takes me 1.5 to 2 hours, and then the same coming home. So being able to just walk over to my music setup and play is such a gift for me. I also feel like my listening skills have improved after playing online, because I have worked hard to have to listen, not only just because I need to stay in time with people, but I really want to hear all the parts, which I can do quite well using the volume controls for all the people in the group. Tempo, you'll find that with latency, there's a lag, there's a little bit of a delay, so that's okay. You kind of learn to cope with that. It's not like being in the same room with someone, but it might be like them being down a 40-foot hallway, or playing with your backs to each other in the corners of a large room. It would be that kind of delay. So really have to pay attention to that continuous flow of music. Don't hesitate. Come in when you think you're supposed to come in. And of course, you can meet new people or not. You can do private sessions with just your favorite chamber musicians. It does very much improve your sniffing capabilities and other ways to give audible signals about when a fermata ends, or new tempo, or whatever you need to signal. And for me, I love this last one, baking while playing. I love to bake, and it's a pandemic, so I learned how to do sourdough bread, and I could let the bread rise or I could let it bake for 40 minutes, which is just fine for playing a quartet. And now we'll talk about what is low latency. We have heard the term latency. What is latency, and what qualifies as low latency as compared to high latency? It's a very technical subject. I'm not going to go deeply into it, but I will give you kind of an overview. So audio latency, there's latency in all kinds of fields, but in audio latencies, it's the delay between the time the sound is created and when the sound is heard. It's usually measured in milliseconds. So how big is a millisecond? 100 milliseconds is a tenth of a second. 500 milliseconds is a half a second. So if we stand 500 feet apart, your sound takes approximately 500 milliseconds to reach me and for my sound to reach you, and you will tell me I'm behind the beat. And that's exactly how it will sound. And that's just with a half second off. With 100 milliseconds, a tenth of a second, we can still hear that, and it will still be somewhat distressing if we're trying to play together. Low latency is generally considered to be 20 to 40 milliseconds. You think I'm nearby. It sounds like I'm in the same room. I'm not behind the beat. If we were to clap our hands, it would sound like we're clapping them together. If we were to play eighth notes together, we would hear them that way, as opposed to higher latency, where I've done these tests where we'll play eighth notes together, and we're here, instead of hearing bump, 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 we're hearing bump, 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 bump. It's not at all together, and it can be distressing. So when you are looking to play music online, you do want to look for an application that is capable of handling low latency audio. The prior slide listed some of those. So quickly, what is the path of sound in these applications? From your musical instrument, which is an analog instrument unless you're using an electric violin or cello or something, you're going to go, that analog sound is going to go into your microphone and into your computer. It's going to be converted to digital along that path. So there's some time there. It's going to be sent to across the internet, and then it's going to end up in a server or on somebody else's computer, depending on which kind of architecture they use, and into their headphones or back into your headphones. All of that takes time. There's conversion from analog to digital, back from digital to analog. There might be compression along the way. There's internet traffic. There are other things happening on your computer. Maybe your computer is set to do an update just at the time that you're going to start playing. That's kind of disastrous when that happens, but there are other processes that could be running in the background that you're not even aware of. All of these things take time. They add to the path of the sound, which makes for more milliseconds in getting that sound from one place to the other. So in terms of the factors that impact that, it's going to be the speed of your gear, the speed of your internet connection, the distance you are from each other or from a shared server, jitter, which is basically all the notes get packetized, they get put in little packets and they get sent across the internet. Well, they don't necessarily all arrive at the same time or in the correct order, and then there needs to be some processing to put them back in order or decide to drop something. It's all very complex, but those are the kinds of things that are going to be factors. Everybody wants to know, how can I decrease my latency? Well, those are some of the primary factors. Do what you can with the ones you can control. And don't worry about the others, like internet rush hour. You can just you don't have any control over that. There is a trade-off. You're either going to have very low latency and maybe not such good audio quality unless you're lucky and all the stars align and everything works really well, which does happen. It happens probably more frequently than having a disaster during an online session. I would say 95 to 99% of the time when I play online, we can play. There's no reason to stop playing. It works. So the app, what does the app do? It tries to balance all of these things and to stabilize that latency so that you don't have blips, you don't have sound dropping out, all of those kinds of things become much, they're taken care of by the apps and playing becomes much more feasible. So looking specifically at the 3 low latency apps that I have used, I have put together this little comparison chart, and I'm not going to go through all of these. I will say that JamKazam and Jamulus have been around a lot longer than SonoBus. So they are better known entities. There's more people using them. Some of the big deciding factors on which one to use for different people might be cost. It would definitely be platform. I know a number of musicians that do not have a Windows PC or laptop. They do not have a Mac, any kind of MacBook. They do have an iPad, but Jamulus and JamKazam, which are the 2 most popular apps, don't work on iPads. SonoBus does work on an iPad. I have tested it. It's a little slower than what I get on my Windows machine, but it does work. I've been able to play using an iPad and SonoBus. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details of peer-to-peer versus client-server. I'm going to wave my hands here and give a 2-sentence explanation. That peer-to-peer means that if I'm playing with Stephanie and my friend in Canada, which is very long distance, we're peer-to-peer means my sound is going to each of them and their sound is coming to each of me, and there's no central server that is mixing it up. The client-server model means that our sound is going from our homes to a server. That server is mixing the sound together, compensating for the perceived delay that it has calculated, and sending back the mixture of audio to each of us. So there's a lot more to that architecture, but we can cover that in detail later if you would like. So the maximum number of users is also kind of key for me in terms of which application I will use for different things. When I play duets with my friend in Canada, we really like SonoBus. There's a great clarity of sound. We can be in a private session, just the 2 of us, and it works really well for us. When I want to have a group together, like I had a winter jam where I had 20 people come together to play the Brandenburg Concerto, and I knew that JamKazam wouldn't handle that. And I knew that not all of them had JamKazam, but most of them had Jamulus or could get to Jamulus pretty quickly. And so I chose Jamulus for that particular event. And JamKazam, I find, works really well for smaller groups, preferably groups that are fairly close together. But I have used JamKazam to play with someone, I've done it a number of times now, someone who's in the DC area, and 3 musicians in Seattle, 1 musician in the DC area works just fine. So you can see that they all have the ability to record. They do not all have built-in video or built-in broadcasting. They all have the ability to do public or private kinds of sessions. The difference being that if it's a public session, anybody could join you. And so somebody who's very eager to play Celtic music or jazz or rock might all of a sudden be in your session, and you need to either mute them or tell them to go away or say, that's interesting, we're not playing that kind of music. So if you were looking to make new friends on these apps, you can certainly do that. The one that's best for that as a social platform is JamKazam. Jamulus and SonoBus do not have social platforms. If you go into public sessions, then you might meet some people that way. And then the ease of setup is somewhat subjective. These are my opinions in terms of ease of setup, sound quality, and which of my friends are using it, which of my mates are using it. Most of them are using Jamulus. Some are using JamKazam, and a few are using SonoBus. They like SonoBus, but it's just too new, and since so many people are already on the other apps, it's not getting as much traction as I think perhaps it deserves. So, equipment. What do you need to make all of this work? So this slide basically shows you that there's kind of a basic setup that you can probably get working. It may or may not sound good depending on your particular gear. But if you want to get started, it's perfectly fine. I recommend that you just start this way, and then you can determine whether or not you need anything more advanced to improve your sound. So we're going to look only at Windows and Mac today. We're not going to look at SonoBus and the iPad. I can answer questions about that if you're interested. So for the internet connection, you must have a broadband connection. Do not try and do this over Wi-Fi. Sure, some of you will be lucky and it will work. But in general, you want the speed of a broadband internet connection. A satellite connection can work. I have a friend who has a satellite connection. I have another friend with a satellite connection. Doesn't work at all because she has a 5-second delay even in Zoom when she's having a Zoom session. And if the weather's bad, it doesn't work well. So broadband internet connection, using an Ethernet cable works great. If your computer does not have the plug for the Ethernet cable, you can purchase an adapter. And here's an adapter for my iPad. It has a little box with a plug for it, and the Ethernet cable goes in there, and then this end goes into my iPad. These things are not very expensive. An Ethernet cable, depending on the length of the cable, they come 5 feet to 100 feet long. I use a 75-foot long cable because I have to route it from the garage and down along the baseboard and up a flight of stairs and around a doorway and under a rug. It's otherwise everybody's tripping over it. So you can get that for maybe $15, $10 even. You also will want to have wired headphones. Here are mine. I like these because they're lightweight. They have a setting for how much pressure they put on my ears. A lot of people like over-the-ear headphones that are better at canceling noise. I found them to be too heavy. And some people just use earbuds. It's fine as long as they are connected by being plugged into your computer. If you're on Windows, you also need to get a piece of software called an ASIO or ASIO driver, audio stream input output. There's a free one called ASIO for all. In fact, most of them are free. And you just can download ASIO for All. There's a link down at the bottom of the page here if you're on Windows, and then install that. And and of course you need the app installed on your computer. The links on earlier slides show you how to get the software. Links on later slides repeat that information. So let's say you try that out and you just aren't getting good sound. The sound is either very faint, either coming to you or going from you, or you just can't turn up the volume well enough or get clarity of sound at that point, or it's just too slow. At that point, you may want to look at some additional equipment, an external microphone. Like I have a condenser mic, and I have a little microphone stand for that clips right onto my stand. I can show you that later. And I have an audio interface box, and this is my audio interface box. It was the least expensive audio interface box I could find back in April when I started doing this. It cost, for the microphone and this interface, audio interface box, which is a Behringer, and a set of headphones. At the time, it only cost me $80. Now that same package costs $110. Still not a huge investment, but you know, this was just a shot in the dark for me when I purchased this. I didn't know that different devices had a much better latency than what I got, but they were also more expensive. So if you want to talk to an expert on what equipment to get, call those folks at Sweetwater. Tell them you're a member of the ACMP. Someone will talk to you, give you excellent advice, and they'll give you a discount. What could be better than that? So if you want to investigate for yourself which devices work best with the different applications, here are some links down at the bottom of this slide that you can follow, and you'll get to lists of, and you can decide how much you want to spend. Or talk to your mates. Maybe they already have something that they say works really well for them.